Good. Well, welcome to everybody to Bere Island. Teresa just told us the weather is going to be very good, so it's warm anyway. I'd like to welcome all those who are joining us on the webcast, and welcome you also to the beginning of our Holy Week retreat. And if you haven't been, at least virtually, to Bere Island before, we hope that you will get some sense of this very beautiful place in West Cork in the southwest of Ireland, in the mouth of Bantry Bay. It's a little island at the edge of the known world, nothing but the Atlantic behind us here, and a place I feel a very strong connection with because my mother was born here, and although I didn't come here till I was about 12 or so, I grew up with stories of Bere Island, which I discovered, of course, mostly to be completely untrue. But that's one of the things I want to talk about today, is true stories. But actually there was a truth in all the stories, and part of that truth is a wonderful sense of beauty here, and of hospitality, of friendship among the people. I'm not saying they're all saints, but they are certainly very loving and welcoming people, and they make the visitors here and the people on retreat every year very welcome. So I hope that for all of us here in person or taking part in the retreat through the webcast, that these coming days will be a time of enrichment, a time of deepening, and an opportunity to prepare in this last lap, to prepare for Easter, and so that we can come in. Please come in now. I'm going to ask everyone to be a little punctual, or no, to be very punctual actually in future, because one of the reasons is that if people come in late, they not only cross the camera, but they make me very irritated, and then people see how irritated I am, and then that sort of defuses the value of what I'm going to say. So for those reasons I would ask you to be on time, but it's nice to see you. Good. So I hope that, as I say, this time of retreat can prepare us for the celebration of Easter, and the way we go through the great rituals, the great ceremonies of the Triduum, the 3 days of Easter, culminating, of course, in the Easter Vigil, and for us at 6 o'clock or so in the morning, when we go to the standing stone at the exact center of the island, a very ancient, prehistoric remnant of early life here on the island. We go there early in the morning to welcome the rising sun and the risen Christ. So I hope that these days of retreat will be enriching in themselves, but also particularly a preparation for Easter. We only have so many Easters in our lives to benefit from, and the better prepared we are for each. We come to each of these Paschal celebrations. We come each year. We come to it with all that we have become since the previous year, and so it's never exactly the same. We tell the same story, we repeat the same rituals, but we ourselves have changed, and we are able, therefore, to be taught and to be touched by the mysteries of Easter more richly, more deeply. And I think in each of these years of celebration, we should progress. We should go through a kind of a spiritual watershed into a deeper, clearer, more simple understanding of the mystery of Christ, the heart of our faith. So one of the things, of course, about the retreat here is that we gather here twice a day to reflect and to meditate together, and then we go back to either our homes or to our accommodation, our lodgings. And how you handle that balance is up to you, of course. But I would recommend that you reflect, talk together with the people that you're sharing a space with, if you are, how you might like to meditate together in the morning, and again, how you would like to end the day, maybe meditate together at the end of the day, depending on where you are, who you're staying with. It's better to prepare for that and talk about that so that you can take advantage of the opportunity to make each day a balance, and each day a deeper sort of entry into the silence. So how you practice the silence is going to be up to you. Nobody's going to be running around the roads on the island catching you if you start talking. There are no CCTV cameras to catch you. So it's really an opportunity for each of us to find the level of silence that you want and need to practice, and that you can practice. And maybe it's something you want to go deeply into, and I'll talk about silence quite a bit in this retreat, because I think we find a great deal of understanding about the mystery of Christ in the experience of silence. So I'll be speaking about silence, but more important than speaking about it is, of course, practicing it. So I'd again just ask you to reflect on that on your own, but also with whoever you're sharing your space with, to decide how you're going to use this quite rare opportunity, really, to be in silence, in a friendly, relaxed, but in a deep way. One little tool I would suggest that you might like to use is writing a little poem that in the Japanese called a haiku. It's a 3-line poem, and it's meant to be a kind of a verbal snapshot of something that has caught your attention or touched you or taught you in some way. It could be something you see, something you smell, something you are aware of, but it should be quite sensible and tangible and real. So, I mean, you can do what you like, but the idea of a haiku is that it should be quite precise and concrete, not sort of not abstract and pious. So it should be really quite snappy and catchy. So the traditional format is 3 lines. I always forget how many syllables. Is it 7, 5, 7? I forget. I think it is. Yeah, 7, 5, 7 anyway, I think it is. That's if you want to be very precise. And it's maybe helpful to do that because it's a bit of a discipline. And practicing the discipline of a little form of poetry like that can be very helpful. It can hold your attention, keep your mind focused. And it's a way of staying silent while using words, very few words, but using them in a very sort of measured way. So, and then if you like to do those haikus, you can keep a notebook with you and do them wherever you like, or you can work on them later. It's a little creative exercise that you might find helpful to maintain that spirit of silence during the retreat. And if you do these, then we'd all like to see them, and you might like to bring them and put them on the table here so that you don't have to sign them. We won't have a competition at the end. So you can just share those little insights that have come to you with others. In the Gospel today, we read the Passion narrative according to the Gospel of Matthew. And we read it in a slightly dramatized way. Everybody in the congregation speaking the part of the crowd and a few other people speaking particular roles. And we tell that story, and we'll tell it again, of course, on Good Friday. We tell that story at the beginning of Holy Week so that we can be in the story, so that the details with which we are probably, most of us, very familiar from childhood, we can be, we're reminded of them, they're highlighted again for us in our imagination. If you learnt that, if you were immersed in those stories from childhood on, then they're part of your imagination, as they are part of our culture and part of our art and music and in the Western and Christian world in particular. But maybe you aren't so familiar with the story, and so the story has a freshness to you. And hopefully, even if you are very familiar with it, by coming into the story in this way, it will become refreshed for you. It will become, you will notice new things or new angles or new details of it. And if you are new to it, if the story is still quite fresh for you, we hope that it will become more familiar as you live with it and allow it to live in you and to become part of your imagination. One of the things that struck me as I listened to it today was actually because I was the priest, as the celebrant at the Mass usually takes the part of Jesus. And I had very little to say, because Jesus doesn't say very much in the Gospel of Gospel of Matthew. He does in other Gospels a bit more. So I was a bit of a walk-on part for that. But it made me aware of how silent Jesus is in the story, and what a strong presence, of course, he has, and everything revolves around him. But he is profoundly silent and strongly silent throughout. And I think the silence of Jesus is his greatest teaching to us. And that's why I'd like to take that as our main theme for this coming week. What we call fact, and we're very interested and concerned about facts in our scientific world. We want facts. In courts of law, we want facts. In science, we want facts. In political controversies, we want to get to the facts. So we have this great preoccupation with facts. But sometimes it's such a preoccupation that we forget the context and the meaning of the facts. And what we call fact can easily become a filter that we make with words or phrases or our imagination and fantasy. We create facts in order not to discover reality, but to avoid it, or to present a version of reality that we like, or that is more convenient for us, in favor of a more a reality that is difficult or embarrassing or inconvenient for us. And there's a great fear today in this world of what was the great expression? Alternate facts? Alternate facts. So it was a sort of a rather chilling statement of brazen, very open, in a way, very honest statement that if these facts don't suit, I have other facts for you. And these other facts, will be more successful. So there's a fear, a growing fear today in our attitude towards politicians and religious figures very often, and scientists or journalists. There's a fear that we can't trust words or facts as they are presented to us anymore. And that's very disturbing, because everything is built on trust. If you're in a marriage or a friendship or in a community or in a contract or in a business, and trust goes out of the window or trust is destroyed, it's a very frightening and disturbing experience. And you don't know where you are when trust has been destroyed. So we fear today we can't trust anything, or very little of what certain types of people in positions of power or influence, what they say. Politicians or social scientists or economists or bishops or whatever. And in the recent Brexit referendum, there was a kind of a universal rejection of experts. The experts had one opinion, but people didn't trust experts anymore and the facts that they were presenting. So experts were untrustworthy. So words in that kind of situation, and it is frightening, disturbing, because it undermines really the basis of any normal society. Words become a kind of infinite regression. It's like when you put one mirror in front of another and you get an image of the mirror, and everything that is reflected in one mirror is reflected in the other, and if you look into it, you just see this infinite regression of one image after the other. And it's quite scary when words themselves become like that. They just regress, or they have circular meanings. The definition of one word is what you just said about it. It just goes round and round and doesn't get anywhere. And life and meaning become very superficial, very circular. And that's an anxiety that's been present in the modern consciousness for a long time. I was in Dublin a few days ago, and I noticed outside a hotel that I was passing by, there was a plaque up on the wall saying that Ludwig Wittgenstein, the philosopher, had stayed and worked there for some months in, whatever it was, in the 1940s or 50s. And Wittgenstein is only published with perhaps the most influential, game-changing philosopher of the 20th century. Only published one book in his lifetime. And Wittgenstein was also very touched by this anxiety and this question of language and meaning and how we communicate, how we share the truth. And he summed it up in this one book that he published. His notebooks were published later. But he says, what can be said at all can be said clearly. And what we cannot speak about should be left silent. Sounds a very simple philosophical statement, and not all of his statements are as easy or as simple as that. But actually, it was his very extraordinary perception of simplicity and the simplicity of truth that made him such an important voice, I think, in modern thought, modern consciousness. He gave up academic philosophy at some point to teach young children. What we can say should be said clearly. What we can't say should be consigned to silence. Does that mean that what is consigned to silence cannot be known or experienced or communicated? I think we know as meditators that silence is not the absence of consciousness, that silence is in fact a very full form of consciousness, that meditation is the work of silence. It is the practice of attention, of simple attention. It is silent and it is simple. And in that still silence of contemplative consciousness that meditation opens up for us, we as meditators and as Christian meditators believe and know in some way that we actually do know what cannot be spoken about, but which belongs in silence and can only be known in silence. In some ways, this is very countercultural for us today because we like to talk and we have endless talk shows. And we turn on the radio first thing in the morning and it's chat, and we listen to chat in the car, and we listen to music or radio in restaurants and elevators and airports and cafes and wherever we are. We're constantly exposed to this flow of talk. And of course, talking can be very therapeutic. Freud, inventor of psychoanalysis, called his work talking therapy. Just getting people to talk about their memories, about their experiences, about what they were frightened of, about what they were fantasizing about, or what they were obsessed about. That to get people to talk could be healing. So no one denies that talking is and can be very healing. But a lot of research has been done into talk therapy, and it's generally believed that if talk is the only part of therapy, only part of psychotherapy, the therapy itself is not very effective. That silence needs to be part of the healing work of psychotherapy. In the same way, we might say, in worship, in the way we worship in church, synagogue, mosque, or temple, silence is rarely part of our experience, and it isn't usually something that people object to if they are given the opportunity to be silenced, for example, during the Mass. But it needs to be explained because people are unfamiliar with it and can be sometimes a little disturbed by it if they're suddenly dropped into silence and they think the priest has fallen off to sleep. So, but it's part of our way of worship today, rather like the way we live, that we don't admit the value of silence into the way we worship. But there is a time to speak and a time to be silent. The secret, of course, is to integrate it, to recognize the balance between these two ways of knowing and communicating. What can be spoken of can be said clearly. What cannot be spoken of should be left in silence. Well, we should know the difference, the distinction. We should have the wisdom, the sensitivity, the discretion to know what can be spoken about clearly and transparently, and what can be and should be left into silence. And of course, silence is part of speech. Apparently, when we make consonants, there is I don't quite hear it myself, but when we form a consonant, we are actually there is a fraction of silence in each consonant we say, and speech is a flow between consonants and vowels in our languages anyway. And in the same way, our sentences and our words have silences between them, and those silences can be very expressive. And if we talk non-stop, we very quickly lose the capacity to pay attention. It's just a stream of words. And there's no syntax, there's no syntax of silence that allows us to make sense and to give us time to absorb it. So actually, silence and speech are not so separated. They work together. They should work together. When we are exposed to a longer period of silence than we're used to, the silence could be very awkward. People say there was an awkward silence in the conversation. It may have been the most truthful moment in the conversation, when actually what had been shared, or what everybody knew but wasn't at that moment able to speak about clearly, was out in the open. So it could have been a very healing and therapeutic and truthful moment, that silence, but we often think of it as an awkward silence, and we try to cover it up. Silence can also be quite fearful. We can be frightened of silence because, and many people are frightened of meditation, because silence takes us into a new place, a new way of being, into we say a deeper place, but it's a more truthful place, where it's not so easy to distract ourselves, to stay running from the truth or dressing it up. And in silence, we can fear, we can experience it as a fearful moment, because we feel we're losing control. We're falling into silence, as you might fall over a cliff or something. That's how we might all have felt about meditation originally. Later, we see that silence is not anything to be frightened of. It's actually something that we look forward to in our regular meditation times as part of our life. We see, after a busy day, we can see silence, the silence of meditation, as a wonderful gift, a wonderful privilege in a way. I mean, to be able to drop the activities, the mental busyness, the words, the planning, the analyzing. We can just drop all of that, and we can open ourselves to this other way of being, this other state, where we let go of words and thoughts and images and enter into silence. But at first, our very first experience of meditation probably wasn't like that. Some people fall straight into it and experience it very quickly, but others, most of us, I think, want to hang on to the side of the swimming pool before we push out, and start swimming. So we hang on to words, we hang on to images, and religious people in particular can be like this. They find it, they're attracted to contemplation, to the silence of contemplation. They've read about it, but they also may have some intuitive feeling of being drawn to it. But it's difficult for them to let go of the side of the pool, to let go of the words and the images and the petitions and the intercessions and the prayers, until a moment comes when they lose that fear and can let go. So silence is worth thinking about, not only, as we might say, in terms of our own spiritual journey or our own healing, but also very much in terms of the kind of world we are living in and passing on to the next generation. And I think if we listen carefully to the story of Jesus, or the climax of his story that we are focusing on this week, we will learn a lot about silence, both as it impacts upon our own health and our own mental and spiritual health, upon our own inner journey, but also upon the way we live responsibly as citizens in a troubled world. Let's just, before we meditate now, let's just call to mind, up to this climax of the story, some of the times in the life of Jesus, reflected in all of the Gospels, in which we see Jesus acquainted with silence and happy and drawn to solitude. The first, of course, is at the beginning of his public ministry after his baptism, he is drawn into the desert. Well, that's been part of our thinking and imagination for the whole of Lent. The 40 days in the desert became our 40 days of Lent. And he went into the desert, led by the Spirit, and prayed and fasted. What we do each time we meditate. We fast from words, from plans, from thoughts, and we enter into the experience of pure prayer. So right at the beginning of his life, we see him preparing for his work, his ministry, with this time of silence and solitude. And then also before the major decisions of his life, for example, choosing his 12 disciples, he took time again in the wilderness or in the desert to be alone and to clarify his mind, to come to a clear point of insight and wisdom before making that decision. And interestingly, often at, presumably anyway, at extreme moments in his life, or moments of loss, his response was also to withdraw after the death of John the Baptist. We're told that he withdrew to a secluded place. Didn't go on to a chat show. He withdrew to a secluded place. We need, even Jesus needed, but we need the space, the time, the environment. We're human beings. Just as we need nutrition, we need balance, we need a certain kind of diversity in our life to keep us healthy. But we also need these times of seclusion, of solitude, times of retreat like this. We also see him withdrawing into silence and into solitude when he became too popular, too busy, when the crowds were really being revved up. Now, no politician would do that. Once you've worked up a crowd, you then manipulate the crowd. You don't then disappear off the airwaves for 3 days. But Jesus sent the crowds away and went up the mountain to pray by himself. And I think any great spiritual leader, you take people like Gandhi or Martin Luther King, also that they, working at that high level of popularity or of publicity and controversy, had to be able to step aside from it, to step aside from the crowd and the dynamics of popularity or the populace, and to go back into solitude. And in his own work, his healing work especially, we see Jesus telling the people he'd healed not to speak about it. It wasn't his intention to use these healings as, PR material to let everybody know who he was and increase his ratings. He often withdrew to the wilderness and prayed, St. Luke tells us, especially after these healings. And then, of course, in Gethsemane, the night before his death, he withdraws to a place of prayer that not so far from Jerusalem, just a few minutes walk, but it sounds as if it was a long way across the Kedron Valley. And he withdrew there, familiar place of prayer, and with his disciples in the silence of the night. And he went there to pray with them and to be alone simultaneously, rather as we are when we're on a retreat, to be alone and to be with others. Very special kind of relationship, special kind of intimacy, a special kind of trust builds up when you can do that with people. And so he says to the disciples, sit here for a while I go and pray over there. And of course he comes back and they've all fallen asleep. So they're not quite able to keep up with him. And they were frightened and they just had the Last Supper, so probably were feeling a bit full. But the relationship here that we can see between solitude and friendship is a very important part of this meaning of silence. So we'll look tomorrow at more examples in this climax of the story during his trial and in the Passion, where the silence of Jesus that he's lived and practiced all his life, that has been part of his way of being, his way of teaching, his way of healing, his way of witnessing, how that silence has now come to a very rich and powerful level of development in him. So again, the practical sort of application of this is seeing these coming days, and if you're just dipping into the retreat through the webcast, I think you find your own way of doing that. But if you're here on retreat on the island, it's going to be easier, but also it needs some planning and some discussion to decide how you're going to make these aspects of silence and solitude real for you in the coming days. But even if you don't, we'll be meditating here together, and it's kind of a concertina approach. We come together, we go apart, we come together again. But the silence can be a continuous element in that process. So let's prepare for meditation now. Let me remind you again of the simplicity and what we can say about meditation can be said clearly, and then what we cannot put into words, we allow to be known in the silence. So your physical posture is always important because we meditate as a whole person. It's not just a head exercise, it's something that involves the body and the mind and the spirit. So it's always good to take a few moments to be aware of your physical posture, to sit straight with your back straight, to relax your shoulders, feet on the ground or your hands on your lap or on your knees, so that you feel both relaxed and alert. Let the muscles of your face relax. Close your eyes lightly, and then very simply be aware of your breathing. You don't have to change the way you're breathing, just be conscious of your breathing. This is a little mindful exercise that prepares us for meditation, because it's beginning to take the attention off our thoughts, that constant stream of chatter going through our minds. We can't turn it off like we turn off the radio, but we can take the attention off this stream of verbal and visual and conceptual consciousness, thoughts or words or ideas. So during the meditation, we lay aside our thoughts, even our good thoughts. Sometimes you are lucky and you get some good thoughts. Sometimes you can solve the problems of the Western world in your meditation. But as soon as you realize that you have stopped taking the attention off your thoughts, that your attention has become attached to your thoughts again, good or bad, you let go of the thought, word or image. Even if it's religious or spiritual or interesting or brilliant. And to let go of the thoughts we follow a very ancient tradition. We take a word, a sacred word, a mantra, and we repeat the word faithfully in our minds and hearts during the whole time of the meditation. So we sit down, we sit still, we close our eyes, and we repeat a single word continuously and faithfully, silently, without moving our lips or our tongue, saying it interiorly, sounding it, listening to it, gently without force, and faithfully, meaning that we return to the word continuously. And simply, meaning that we are not evaluating ourselves or how things are going or whether we are good or bad meditators. That is not relevant. So choosing the word is important because you want to stay with the same word all the way through the meditation and from day to day. And the word I would recommend is the word Maranatha. Maranatha is the oldest Christian prayer. It means, "Come, Lord." It's in Aramaic, the language that Jesus spoke, and St. Paul ends the first letter to the Corinthians with it. So it was already a very sacred and special word for the very early Christians. If you choose this word, say it as 4 syllables, Ma, Ra, Na, Tha. Ma, Ra, Na, Tha. I would suggest you don't visualize the word, but listen to it as you sound it. Ma, Ra, Na, Tha. You'll find your own rhythm. Say it gently and faithfully. We could lead into the meditation with this short prayer that John Main composed. Heavenly Father, open our hearts to the silent presence of the Spirit of your Son. Lead us into that mysterious silence where your love is revealed to all who call. Maranatha, come, Lord Jesus.